Now let's go to the UK, where Boris Johnson and Home Secretary Priti Patel have promised to implement an Australian-style points-based immigration system. Under the new process in a post-Brexit Britain, EU migrants will be treated the same as those from the rest of the world. John, this is going to be popular policy, you would think, and we know controlling borders and immigration was a key factor for Brexit voters.
Well, just as long as the Polish plumber can still go and do work in London, because my mother's Polish and I have lots of Polish cousins working in the UK, but I've got to say, as an Australian, I'm amused by all of this interest in the Australian system from the UK. I'd argue it's common sense. It's about identifying where jobs are needed, what employment skills are required, and the issue of migration had a huge role in the Brexit vote and Boris Johnson's election. I struggle to see, from my Australian perspective, the controversy this seems to arouse in the UK.
Now, Daisy, the left have absolutely lost their minds with this proposal. Priti Patel in particular has been attacked viciously. Her background and the fact that her parents were migrants and under what circumstances they came to the UK has all been brought up. And I think it's really exposed some of the bigotry that we see from the left, that someone like Priti Patel, who is such a competent performer within the Johnson government, is essentially being attacked for her heritage. They're saying because you're a woman of colour, you shouldn't be pushing ahead with this proposal.
Well, yes, exactly. It's that very strange, internalised, but I guess not so internalised bigotry on the left, which is that racial minorities are actually only useful to white leftists when they're saying the things that white leftists want them to say. It's this idea of you're a racial minority, you're from a certain place, therefore you have to have this set of opinions, and if you don't have that set of opinions, well, there's something wrong with you. You're some sort of race traitor, and we can be as vicious and as cruel and as awful to you as we want, because ultimately it's on you. You've got the wrong opinions, and we want nothing more to do with you. You know, it's an extraordinary kind of cult, kind of Marxist, tribalism they have, and Priti Patel has sort of cops the double barrel, I think, of leftist bigotry. She's got, on the one hand, she's a woman, so she gets the you're a woman with the wrong opinions, and then on the other hand, she's also a migrant who is not white, so she cops both. It's a weird, very ironic sort of intersectional prism right there. But look, I think it's an interesting. I'm quite flattered as an Australian that the UK seems to be looking to our immigration system with such a favourable light. I mean, Donald Trump did the same thing, and as I always say, Australia has one of, if not the most successful multicultural society in the world. I think largely because of our emphasis on legal immigration and skills-based immigration, and our strong stance on illegal immigration. So everyone who is here wants to be here. They have the tools and the skills to contribute to the country, to get out what they put in, and as everyone wants to be here, well, we can all kind of move towards the same societal goal.
Absolutely. Now, staying in the UK, more sentences have been handed down in the Huddersfield grooming case, with 6 more men jailed for up to 15 years each for sexually abusing girls. The men were found guilty of multiple counts of rape and indecent assault against victims aged 13 and 14. Now, this is the 6th trial related to Huddersfield grooming gangs, and so far we've had 34 men convicted with combined prison sentences totalling 377 years. The victims were kept under the control of this gang with violence and threats of violence, and Daisy, the most tragic thing with these cases, these grooming cases throughout the UK, is that the authorities knew it was happening. They ignored the pleas for help from the victims. They did not have the courage to prosecute these cases because they thought they'd be labelled racist.
It's just an unbelievable injustice that this has been allowed to go on for so long. And the thing is that this goes back to the 80s in some cases with the number of towns that this was happening in. I mean, obviously, you've got Rotherham, that's the most famous one. You've got Newcastle, you've got Luton, you've got this incident here. It's been going on for an extremely long time. And there was a report actually that was done by the Quilliam Institute, which is a think tank, a couple of years ago. And it was run actually by two Pakistani Muslims. And they'd noticed a lot of commentary in the media about how the majority of these grooming gang members seemed to be Pakistani Muslims. And they thought, well, the media must just be being racist. Let's go in ourselves and try to debunk this. But what they actually found was the complete opposite. And they found that 84% of members of grooming gangs were Pakistani Muslims, and they preyed mostly on underage white girls. So there's a huge racial element there, and the people who conducted the study were absolutely mortified by what they'd found. It was extremely confronting. But with the incidents that happened in Rotherham, it was when all that came to light, it was in the government report. This isn't some sort of right-wing conspiracy theory that we all have. In the government report, it stated the reason that the authorities hadn't moved faster and hadn't helped the victim was because they didn't want to be labelled racist. I think that is an absolute betrayal of the legal system of these poor girls. It's been going on for far too long. This is just another incident in a decades-long string of them. And until we all kind of wake up to, until the UK authorities actually wake up to the problem here, it's going to continue.
Now this, John, is really the sinister side of PC culture. We all sometimes mock political correctness and how far it goes and how ridiculous it can get, and it's almost treated like a joke. But there can be some really sinister consequences, and this is an example. You've had literally thousands of girls who were victimised, who weren't assisted by authorities because there was this fear that because the victims are mainly white and the perpetrators are mainly from Pakistani backgrounds, that will be deemed racist. So they essentially turned a blind eye. And I would like your opinion, John, but I would like to see some consequences for those authorities who didn't do their job.
Well, this is the part of Britain, or one of the parts of Britain, that's broken. And as you say, we can laugh about PC if it happens at the university or in the media, but the danger of what's occurred is it has gone to the authorities of the public police. And this is the danger. And when you engage in policing that is not blind to race or ethnicity or colour or religion, you have these sorts of situations. And then the other thing to add to this discussion is we've got an example of what the police were not doing. I can tell you right now what the police in the UK are doing, and it has received a lot of publicity in the UK. Police are going to visit the workplaces of people who they think issuing tweets or making public comments that are in some way transphobic or homophobic, for example. And they're not going to charge them with anything. They're going to their workplace to warn them of this. So at one level you have the police engaged in, as you say, an absolute whitewash of what's happened in these communities. On the other hand, they're going after people who issue arguably offensive tweets. Now, this is it's more than a misallocation of resources. It's a fundamental problem that goes to the top of British society, and it's something that Boris Johnson and Priti Patel and others have to fix, and the sort of thing's going to come to Australia too.
Well, yeah, there is a significant culture problem within the police in the UK, and you're right. They have been checking people's thought processes. It's so Orwellian, right. And pursuing things that they call non-crime offences. So these aren't even tweets that could be misconstrued or interpreted as hate speech. These are often jokes. We had Harry Miller on Outsiders, and he'd sent a tweet saying, "I was born a mammal, but I identify as a fish." And that was one of the reasons that cops turned up to his work to check his thinking. And he took his case to the High Court. They won, but not everybody can afford to do that. But that's a discussion for another day. I'm going to go to a quick break, and we're going to be back to discuss a university's plan to decolonise our society.